Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Can you please talk to me as to what's your version? Can you just express why you don't think we need a crime summit?
I don't think a crime summit is going to achieve anything at all. Keep in mind that council has a whole range of responsibilities, and this is one of the things I think is very important. There's an expression that's often used that you need to keep in your lane, and that's absolutely true of the three levels of government. We've got federal, we've got state, we've got local. There are responsibilities that are fairly clearly defined for all three of those levels of government. One of the things that local government cannot control is the police. That's controlled by the state government. We don't control the sentencing laws. We don't control the magistrates. Well, the magistrates are independent anyway, but we don't control the processes involved with crime. We've got a council resolution that says that we will work with the agencies and bring agencies together to have discussions, and we've been doing that for years now, for as many years as I can remember. We've made sure that we've gotten agencies together, but it's not necessarily our responsibility, but we're happy to coordinate that to get various government and non-government agencies together and have discussions about things they can do around crime. But if I ring the Arana police commander and start to tell him what to do, he would be within his rights to say, who are you? You don't control me. I don't really have to take any notice of what the mayor or council says. Now, the commander is not that rude that he'd say that to me, but he certainly would have a question mark in his mind saying, I don't answer to the local government. Why am I even involved in this? So getting council involved in crime doesn't make a lot of sense. The other part that's interesting is when you look at some of the data. When some people were talking about a crime summit earlier on this year, they were saying that crime was getting out of control, and I didn't have any data to back that up. I spoke to the police, I spoke to some people in the legal system, and they said you've really got to rely on the BOXAR stats, the Bureau of Crime Statistics and Research. And they come out with their data every 3 months. They update their data, and it's delayed a little bit. So I thought, well, maybe there is some data there, but the data we had at the time was only till the end of December. So the new data's come out till the end of March. And that data, I had a look at that, and I did a comparison on a rolling 12-month comparison. So in other words, what's happened over the first 3 months of this year that's changed, and how has that changed? And when I looked at that, overall across the state, the number of offences combined across the state, and I thought it would be sensible to compare it to the state, a 2.5% increase in all offences across the state. In Dubbo, and this is Dubbo Regional Council local government area, in Dubbo we've got a 1.9% increase. So yes, crime has gone up slightly in the Dubbo Regional Council area, but it hasn't gone up as much as across the state. And there were some reasons that the BOXAR information, when it came out with, there were some reasons that were put behind some of this, which I'll get to in a moment. But then when you break down some of the things that people were complaining about, in particular, break and enter into a house, across the state that went up by 1.2%, but in Dubbo it went down by 6.5%. Things like domestic violence-related assault went up by 1.8% across the state, down by 3% in Dubbo. Sexual assault up by 0.6% across the state, down by 16.3%. Motor vehicle theft was an interesting one, and this saw a very big spike across the state of 4.6%. And the media release that came out with the BOXAR stats talked about the particular problems they're having with crime related to motor vehicle theft. And again, this is across the state. And it also talked about some increased activity as people were coming out of their lockdowns and out of reduced activity due to COVID. And so there was increased activity in a range of areas, but motor vehicle theft was one that was pointed out. Motor vehicle theft in the Dubbo Regional Council, LGA, went up by 0.3%. Now again, the state went up by 4.6%. So a marginal increase in the Dubbo Regional Council area. Those numbers that I've just read out there, to me, aren't alarming, aren't anything that's going to call for a crime summit. And I also spoke to some other mayors in other areas, and they all told me that all a crime summit will do for you is advertise to the world that you've got a crime problem. Well, let's face it, everywhere's got a crime problem. One theft, one break-in, one crime, one criminal activity is more than we'd like to see, but we live in a modern world where that's going to be part of our modern world. So we'd love to see zero crime. That's not realistic. But if you try and advertise the fact to everyone that you've got a worse crime problem than anyone else has got, then visitors, tourists stay away from your area, and then you harm your visitation economy, you harm your hospitality, you harm the overall reputation of your community, and that can take years to recover from.
It sounds to me like the crime in Dubbo is being beat up unnecessarily, and that actually is going to harm our economy. Am I hearing you correctly?
I think you're absolutely spot on, Sam. And you can cherry pick crime stats. You can look at crime stats every different way you want, depending on what you want to look at. Now, I've read some of those crime stats there from the latest Boxar information that were the ones where Dubbo's gone down a bit. The other one is sexual touching, sexual act and other sexual offences, up by 0.6% in the state, down by 9.1% in Dubbo. But there's other ones that have gone up. But the interesting part is you look at those types of crimes and how you feel as an individual. For example, malicious damage to property, so vandalism essentially, it went up by 1% across the state, but in Dubbo it went up by 9.3%. So, and that was off a fairly low base, keep in mind, but it went up by 9.3%. So that sounds pretty bad. But if I see someone that spray painted something on a wall as I drive down the street, I don't feel like I'm personally threatened. My body, my livelihood, my family isn't threatened. It's just a bit annoying that someone's gone and done some damage to some form of property. And this is the thing that I think people are missing. So when you see crimes committed in Sydney, for example, where someone comes out of a gym and they're gunned down as they come out of a gym related to some crime syndicates or some crime bosses and their faction wars or turf wars they're having there, I don't walk out of the gym in Dubbo and feel like I wonder if today's the day that someone's going to be gunned down beside me. So I feel much safer in a Dubbo than I do in, say, a Sydney, because the type of crimes and the physicality of those crimes is much better in a Dubbo than it is in a Sydney. So I still feel safer going to a supermarket at night or walking down the street after I've been to a pub at night time in Dubbo than I do in many other places across the state. So again, you've got to look at the crime numbers and those types of crimes to see how you might be personally affected by those.
Beating on about a crime summit is an unhelpful exasperation of issue.
More to the point there, talking about a crime summit, what do you actually hope to achieve by a crime summit, and are there other ways to achieve it? So, for example, if you think you need more police on the ground, and I personally think that the police do an absolutely fantastic job, but if your focus for a crime summit is to get more police on the ground, then the best way to do that is to send some communication off to the police minister and say, we need more police in Dubbo. That would be a more effective way of achieving outcome. Do you think by having a crime summit you're going to change the sentencing laws? Do you want to see minimum sentences or repeat offenders getting minimum sentences, for example? Is that your objective? Well, if that's the case, send off some communication to the state government, to the Attorney General perhaps, and say, we think you should change the sentencing laws because this is happening. So there are other, much more effective ways of achieving outcomes if you can clearly define what you're trying to achieve by a crime summit. Now, I'm not sure if people know what they're trying to achieve by a crime summit, and so look at those things you want to achieve and take the actions that will actually deliver those for you, rather than it may be said that a crime summit is just a populist call by some people to get some media airtime rather than actually achieve effective outcomes.
Thank you. Well said.
Thanks, Sam.
Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickinson from Dubbo Regional Council.